Good.
Yeah. Yeah, it's the first.
Thanks for saying that, Malcolm.
Well,
No,
the glass is half full, to be sure.
I was just starting to get a little anxious. So you're right.
We may want to adjourn before the dad jokes start happening. Just
That's why I'm here. To listen, not to be the dad joke.
You're on such a roll too, Stephanie, there. Sorry to cut you off.
It's okay. I'm good at talking, so I'll get back on that roll pretty quick.
How are you adjusting to the southern climate?
It is hot. It is very warm here. Yeah, it's different. I really loved spring in Nunavut, so it's different to be here, but I also really love green and trees and the smell of grass, and my hay fever not so much, but yeah, it's been really good. It's been nice. It's been really nice.
It's gonna get hotter, I hope.
You ain't seen nothing yet.
Yeah.
I just remember Toronto summers when I was in my 20s and I thought it was great, and great skin, great hair, and then coming down from the north and being in Ontario for about 4 days in the summer was just like a shock to the system. So I'm hoping that the slow build will be helpful.
It's a slow boil. Yes.
Like a frog in a pot,
Mhm. Yeah, you won't jump out.
No, hopefully not.
No.
Not yet anyway.
We have a solution. What did she say there? I think we may be at it in a minute, hopefully.
So
I'll just check with Gary to see if we need to start all over again or do the rest of the other stuff.
So I've got a new link. I'm just posting it on social media to get the message out. And then once I know it's working, I can make that statement. And yes, I think we should start again, Councillor Brennan, just to be on the safe side.
Okay.
But give me 2 more minutes.
Yep. Actually, I need 1 minute, so I'll be right back.
Well, I'm glad I stayed with the reveal in the public square, because it went on for another hour and everybody else had gone, and I was glad I stayed with them. So it was beautiful.
Yeah, glad you're able to stay behind for that.
Yeah.
So we're on social media, and I'll just wait for Councillor Brennan to get back. So just know that we are live right now.
Okay.
All right, so so we are live, Councillor Brennan. Now we're on a different feed than we normally are. So we're now under is it Vimo? So the link has been put on our Town of Smiths Falls Facebook page, and so we are live, and I'll make sure after the meeting that it's posted on Facebook as well as our YouTube channel.
Okay.
So if you wanted to start again, and I believe we're live right now, but I will count you down anyway.
Okay,
In 3, 2, 1.
okay, welcome back. Maybe for some of you, we had a little technical difficulty. There is a new link for our committee of the whole meeting today on May 23rd. And we apologize for that, but we're back. And that link has been posted on our Facebook page for everyone to watch. So hopefully you've tuned in. And I'm going to start all over again. We did get going a little bit, but I'll start with our land acknowledgement. On May 23rd, 2023, we acknowledge that the sacred land on which Smiths Falls is now located has been a site of human activity for over 10,000 years and is rich in indigenous history. This land is the ancestral and unceded territory of the Algonquin Anishinaabe Nation. We are grateful to the Algonquin ancestors who cared for the land and water in order that we might be here today. We are also grateful to the Algonquin people for their contribution in making of the Rideau Canal, which runs through Smiths Falls. We are mindful of broken covenants and the need to reconcile with all our relations. Together, may we care for this land and each other, drawing on the strength of our mutual history of nation building through peace and friendship, and being mindful of generations to come. So I'll call again for amendments to the agenda, and I think we have had one, and we'll just reiterate that. We're going to flip priority issue 8.5 with 8.3, so those will be reversed. So 8.3 will be the official plan residential development monitoring report, and 8.5, well, no, 8.3 will be draft sign bylaw, and 8.5 will be official plan residential development. So we just changed those two for scheduling purposes. I'll call for disclosure of monetary interest again. And seeing none, we have no delegations. And once again, I'll do a recommended motion that the minutes of the May 8th, 2023, May 11th, 2023, and May 15th, 2023 committee of the whole meetings be received and filed. And that is moved by, if I can remember, Councillor Robinson, seconded by Councillor Quinn, all in favor. And that's passed. And Director Clark, I'll ask you to begin again with your excellent report that you had started before. So
Okay, thank you.
off to you.
Awesome. So like I said, I'm just wanting to do a brief update to let you guys know what we've been up to over in community services. And the first was around geese control, noting that they're back. So some colleagues of mine across the country and in municipalities throughout North America have actually provided some products that they use in their municipalities that seem to be working. Whether it will work for us, that remains to be seen. So we have 2 products that will be securing to do a bit of a test or a pilot with before we sort of go any further and spend more money to try to do some geese control. So that's happening in the next few weeks. The second piece was around the dog park and the ball field and some of the tension that's potentially happening there. One of the things that we are looking at is asking the ball field users and the leagues to ensure that they're providing any incident reports as and when a ball goes into the dog park. If they're hitting an extra long home run, if they could please let us know. We're looking for actually where the ball enters the dog park, at which point, so that we can be more targeted in our interventions. We're also encouraging residents who do witness it or who have experienced it and hopefully haven't been hit by it to provide us as much information as humanly possible around any balls coming into the dog park from the ball field, so that we can make sure that we're targeting an intervention. In addition to that, we're planting some trees, which is sort of a long-term hopeful solution, as well as increasing signage, just warning folks that this is a potential that may happen. The next is, unfortunately, we had just installed a life ring over at Murphy Park. It was stolen 4 days later. We do have the individual on camera, and that's been provided to other 2 individuals. That information has been provided to the police. We're actually very disappointed that this is a life-saving device that was removed for no apparent reason. It certainly wasn't to be used the way that it's supposed to. We are looking at and have ordered some signage around who to call if the device is missing or is broken. That should be coming in soon. And we are also increasing some signage around the fact that that is an area that's on camera. So we're hoping that that will be a deterrent. We have a couple of life rings coming in and we'll be replacing that, and we'll just continue to replace it because we do think it's an important thing. But they're not super cheap. Good quality life rings are a couple $100s a piece. And so we want to make sure that the community is aware that if and when someone removes a life ring that's not necessary, they're actually potentially endangering someone who needs it. So that's just a message for the community as well. And a long-awaited Town Hall Phase 3 update. I don't have a fixed and firm date yet. I really wish that I did. But I am doing a walkthrough with the contractor tomorrow. We're in the final stretch. I may have said that previously, but I mean it for real this time. And we're walking through the deficiencies list tomorrow with a fine-tooth comb. So hopefully we'll have a better, more fulsome update for you next week. But I do anticipate we'll be able to get in very soon. And that's all I have, other than I just noticed that Ryan Elliott is here and he'll speak to his item at some point. But he is here today with us for the 25 Old Mill Road project.
Thank you, Director. Any questions, comments from colleagues? Councilor McGuire.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Director Clark. That was excellent. It's great to hear that we're making progress in the geese, and it's great to hear. Well, all of it was great to hear. So thank you very much. It's refreshing to get a report from Community Services again.
Yeah, thank you for that. And on the dog park, that was an item that was in the budget and for netting, but I think a more targeted approach is a good idea in terms of finding out who's hitting them and where they're going. I don't know if it's a regular occurrence, but signage is actually a great idea. So at least the users of the park will know that they shouldn't be parking their cars along the fence line. There's ample parking towards the curling club there. So thank you for that. And I'll also mention that we are in the 10th anniversary year of the dog park. So I look forward to working with you on that, doing something for that in the fall maybe. But thanks so much for the report. So I don't think there's any more directors' reports this evening. No. And there was one correspondence item on our agenda from the Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing regarding Brownfield Financial Tax Incentive Program. And there was a suggestion made by the ministry. I would suggest that maybe a committee, if they agree, we can put that on the next committee of whole meeting, which is June 12th, and get a report from staff on that, and then we can move on. I don't know that it's time sensitive if everyone agrees with that. We're good? Okay. So we do have one brief in-camera item tonight, and I'll look for a mover and seconder that the Council of the Corporation of the Town of Smithville Falls, as provided under Section 239 of the Municipal Act 2001, as amended, move into a closed door meeting at, we'll say 5:39 to discuss personal issues about identifiable individuals as it relates to committee appointments. Moved by Councillor Quinn, seconded by Councillor Robinson. All in favor? So this should be very brief. It won't be like the last delay, so we'll be back soon.
I'm just checking, Councillor Brennan, to make sure with changing this platform that we're set up to do in-camera rooms. If we're not, we'll have to delay the in-camera session till next meeting, which shouldn't be an issue, but I'm double checking right now.
Okay.
at this point, Chair Brennan. I think we'll just defer that issue till next committee of the whole, just to keep this meeting moving forward.
Sounds good. We're still live, so as you probably heard, we're going to defer that just because of our technical difficulties earlier. And so it's not a pressing issue, so that'll be at a future meeting. And I don't need to move out of camera, I don't believe. Dr. Snell.
Correct.
Okay. So we'll just move right on to priority issues. And 8.1 is 25 Old Mill Road Heritage Engineer update with Director Clark to introduce our guest.
Thank you. So we've engaged the services of Valley Engineering, and Ryan Elliott was in attendance in town today. I believe he's actually on his way back to his home, but he is hopefully pulled over on the side of the road and has tuned in and will give us an update on what he discovered today. So we really appreciate Ryan and his firm being able to, in a very brief turnaround time, come and join us and provide us some direction and support when we need it most. So Ryan, if you're good, I'll turn it over to you, unless CEO Morris, you have anything to add?
No, all good.
I think that covers it. So Mr. Elliott, the floor is yours.
Okay, can everybody hear me?
I think so.
Okay. Thank you for the opportunity. Yeah, I am just pulled over on the road here. I'm on my way back, so I'll be brief. I was engaged by the town to take a look at the facility, at the Heritage Building, to determine whether or not there were options for rehabilitation or preservation. I was given a lot of detailed information from Stephanie and various other staff members, so thank you for that. Some very good drawing sets, very valuable information. I was able to confirm a lot of the measurements and details from the drawings during my visit today. A special thank you to the fire department and the police department for their assistance with me today, especially the fire department for the use of the aerial vehicle. That was very helpful. Basically, in a nutshell, what I found is the structure does have damage. I do need to do some further calculation from an engineering point of view based on the samples that were taken today. I was able to obtain quite a good number of mortar samples and stone samples and brick samples that I'm bringing back to our facilities for testing. My overall opinion of the structure at this point, without the benefit of doing the engineering analysis, without the data, is that you do have options. Demolition and abatement, brownfield cleanup is an option that's on the table. That's been presented already. A further option that you may wish to consider based on the condition of the structure is that the upper parapet of the brick portion of the structure and the upper parapet of the stone structure are in poor condition, as would be expected, but they're not unsalvageable. The third floor, the deterioration of mortar and stone, that can be attributed to time and deterioration, as well as fire damage and thermal shock from firefighting. Wasn't as detrimental as I had expected. I did find the stone and mortar to be in good condition in areas and in poor condition in others. The benefit of a structure of this nature is that stone masonry of this vintage, building of that nature, would be designed for the interior to burn out and for the structure to be able to be rebuilt from within. Timber interiors were typically burned out, and the load-bearing stone exterior walls would remain intact. Notwithstanding that, the structure does need rehabilitation, but I think the overlying impression that I'm giving at the moment is that you do have a preservation option. They're based on some further analysis that I need to do with the result of the samples and running the model through to check for overall global stability of the walls. Barring that, I would say that you do have an option to erect scaffolding, to do temporary bracing, and do selective interior demolition and fire abatement work. That would have to be very carefully done by a specialist contractor, but it is a possibility for you to consider. Notwithstanding the report that I was provided by another structural engineer that was retained by the insurance company that recommended immediate demolition, the option of other opportunities were not expressed in that report. Not that I disagree with some of his observations, but I would certainly introduce another option that you do have the availability of rehabilitation if you so choose.
Okay, thank you, Ryan. Councillor McKenna has his hand up.
Thank you, Mr. Elliott. Can you hear me okay?
I can.
Thank you. I know that the red brick building is dependent on the stone building to remain standing, but the same isn't true. The stone building could stand by itself. Do you have an opinion on, is the brick building a lot worse off than the stone building?
No, as a matter of fact, a lot of buildings of this nature, the late 19th century brick, the parapets are always in poor condition. Parapets and chimneys are always in the worst condition because of freeze thaw and natural deterioration. But I was able to obtain a sample of an interior wide brick and an exterior wide brick and a very good mortar bed sample. So that'll tell me a lot. But essentially, from being able to access the full front face of the red brick 1896 building, that it was in excellent condition. In one location, an interior roof beam had collapsed onto a mullion of the one of the center windows on the second floor, and the hardwood framework of the windows is in such good condition that the beam is resting on the mullion and the mullion is holding it up. So I was definitely surprised. It's my understanding from the fire department that the fire migrated into that section of the building through an open door on the second or third floor. And so the damage in that section isn't as severe as in the original stone building.
Thank you.
Thanks for that. Any other questions? Panko.
Yes, thanks, Mr. Elliott. So you've given us some, I guess, some concept here that it is possible to retain the structures. I guess, in your report, will you be able to provide greater details as to the extent of work that would be needed to shore up these buildings? Of course, we know that our police service is anxious to get in and do an investigation. So a couple of questions. There's one, I guess, timeline to finalize your report, and two, maybe the volume of work to be needed in order to permit police or others to gain entry. And understanding you probably would have to be a bit of a tactical demolition or to be even able to access. Is that correct?
Yes, you're exactly correct. My initial, upon my arrival, everyone introduced each other, and I spoke to the police chief and the fire chief at length about what my objectives were and the priority of safety. Unfortunately, the interior floors of the original stone building are all but gone, so it is unsafe to enter the building. Excuse me. And the adjacent 1896 red brick addition, from the main door, a lot of it is still intact. So you'd have to do some very thorough and careful research into the integrity of the structural members there. So in terms of getting interior access to conduct an investigation, it still remains an unsafe location. If the town were of a mind to hire a specialist fire salvage or abatement contractor to scaffold and essentially laterally brace the building and do what I would call a pickup sticks selective demolition, it's a methodical and logical process, but it can be done, but it would take time and, of course, the requisite funding.
Well, thank you. And is it fair to assume, like, in either case, whether council decided to proceed with a full demolition of a site or preservation of the two structures and demolition, it still requires I guess, a pretty tactical approach to demolition in order to preserve, I guess, the potential integrity of an investigation. Is that a fair statement?
Yes, and I would humbly submit that the cost and care of demolition would be in the similar order of magnitude of a bracing and selective abatement.
Okay, thank you very much.
Councilor McGuire.
Thanks, Mr. Chair, and thank you very much, Mr. Elliott, for coming down. Thanks to all the staff involved in setting this up, and thanks to our fire and police services for the assistance. I know I can't tell you how many people have come up to me or approached me the last 2 weeks saying, we've lost so much to fire in this town. We need to look into anything we can do to save these buildings. And the visit today was an important part of that. So I really look forward to seeing your report. I really look forward to seeing what our options are going forward. And I know when the Municipal Heritage Committee meets tomorrow and Wednesday, that they're all watching this tonight, and they're going to be very appreciative of the work that's being done as a good steward of a heritage designated building. So I really appreciate the effort that's gone into this. Thank you.
Thank you for that. I did have a question, Mr. Elliott. I haven't met you, and I'm not sure what company you work for. So who do you work for?
I work for a company called G. Douglas Valley Limited. We're located in Simcoe, Ontario.
Okay. And you're a professional engineer, of course.
I am, yes.
Okay. So that's good to know, because I was unaware of that. Then, we had been circulated the original the engineer's report, and as an elected official, I'm really concerned with some of the language that was used in it, like based on the severity and extent of damages, the limestone building must be demolished immediately in a controlled manner by a specialized contractor. And he points to the idea that the potential for a large scale collapse exists. So do you agree with those statements?
Without the benefit of concluding my analysis, I wouldn't say in black or white terms whether I agree or disagree. My mandate was to evaluate the structure to determine if there are options. I certainly wouldn't leave the site alone, unabated for a period of time, because it will deteriorate further. It does pose a liability risk in terms of personal public safety and personal security. So time is of the essence, which is why I was able to react as quickly as I can, and I'm literally on the road now to get the samples back to the lab facilities so that we can get some test data from what we have. I think, and to be fair to that report, and I do get called in situations similar to that, not at the retainer of the insurance provider, but a lot of times looking at heritage buildings and owners, when they ask me to do a structural assessment, one phrase always comes to mind. It's kind of a joke, but I say anything is possible with enough explosives and money. If you want to save the building, you can. If you leave it alone, it will start to fail. So time is of the essence. But I think in his position, I would have been inclined to write a similar report, but I probably also would have added some options for consideration to let the owner decide rather than writing a sort of a single ending report.
Okay, thanks for that. And I assume then we're going to get a stamp report from you at some point earlier rather than
Yes,
later, I hope.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, good to know. Thank you. Anybody else? Okay, I don't see any hands in the air. I want to thank you for coming down and spending your time with us, and we really look forward. Do you have a date or a timeline for a report for us?
I do. In the original scope of work I provided to Mr. Morris, I discussed a timeline. I think I've got it here in front of me somewhere. I had anticipated being able to do some preliminary analysis when I get back to my office in the coming days. I do need the material samples that I was able to obtain today to be tested, and that'll take some time to get the data back from that. But I had hoped that the sample analysis, from what I provided to Mr. Morris the other day, I'm hoping my sample analysis will be ready by June 2nd, and that the full engineering analysis would be available by June 9th, with a draft report by the 16th and a final by the 23rd. And of course, what I've said in my scope of work proposal to the town was that given the nature of this circumstance, any opportunity to accelerate this schedule will of course be exploited, because I do realize that time is of the essence. And given the nature of the scene as a crime scene and an ongoing investigation, having a police officer present there to look after the site on a 24/7 basis is going to end up costing a lot of money. So the faster I can do my work, the better for everyone.
Yeah, for sure. Any other questions? No. CEO Morse.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So the express purpose of today's discussion was to give council and the broader community an idea of whether there are options or not. And so we've heard there are options. So we have not commissioned Mr. Elliott to proceed until we had this discussion. But so I'd just like to get a sense if council wishes to have Mr. Elliott, conduct his analysis, do the engineering work, and come back with a report.
What I'd ask the question of how much does that cost?
What I can say is we have a proposal and we have authorization from our insurer that it is part of our claim.
Okay, I'm good with it then.
Okay. So with that, we'll work with Mr. Elliott to accelerate this as much as humanly possible, and we'll come back with something as soon as we can.
Thank you for that.
Thank you.
Okay, good. So I think we can move along. 8.2 is tax-based redevelopment application 28 Beckwith Street North with Chief Planner Carl Grenke. Planner Grenke, are you here?
I am, Mr.
Yeah.
Chair. Actually, Planner One, Mary Remig will be speaking to this report, as she is an expert on the history and the options that are available for council's consideration. So, with your permission, Mr. Chair, I'd like to pass the baton to Planning Clerk Mary Remig.
With pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you, Carl, and thank you, Mr. Chair. Good evening, everyone. So the purpose of this report is to present council with a few options for final TIG approval for the 20 Beckwith Street North CIP application that was made in 2017 under the Downtown and Waterfront Area CIP. So this report is a follow-up of report 2023-037, which was presented to council on March 13th, which provided an extensive overview of the history of the file. Following the staff presentation in March, the property owner advised of their intention to appeal the post-development impact assessment of the property, which currently classifies this property as a fully commercial property, and they feel that it is residential use. In light of that new information, council asked that the final approval of the TIG program be deferred pending the outcome of the appeal process. The owner has now advised staff that this assessment will remain uncontested for the foreseeable future and have asked staff to proceed. Although the assessment will remain commercial for the time being, the property owner has requested the option to open up the agreement or reconsider the approval later in the future, as it is expected that the property will evolve to a full residential use over time. So the plan is essentially to incorporate that as part of the agreement if there is an agreement from council on that matter. Prior to this report, we did consult the property owner to give a few additional options and scenarios for consideration. The consultation resulted in 3 options that are attached to this report. Option 1 is the staff recommendation, which was supported by the majority of council at their meeting on March 13th. This option represents a maximum contribution of 80% of the commercial tax increment in year 1 of the agreement, with a steady decline each year of 8% until fulfillment of the 10-year term. Although 2 additional options are presented for council's consideration, staff's recommendation for final approval of this application remains unchanged, given that no new information has been presented. Option number 2 represents the owner's preferred option. It represents the maximum contribution of 80% for the first 5 years of the agreement, with a steady decline of 5% each year until the 5-year term is the 10-year term is complete. Option number 3 is an additional option developed by staff. It takes into consideration the property owner's preference to have the maximum contribution rebated back to them in the earlier years of the agreement, with a decline in assistance occurring roughly halfway through the agreement. So the scenario recommends the maximum 80% contribution for the first 4 years, with a significant decrease to 45% in year 5, followed by a steady decline of 5% each year until fulfillment of the term. So council is advised that the projections included in the commitment scenarios may vary each year depending on the annual assessed value of the property and council's approved tax rates. If you have any questions while you're discussing, I'm here to help.
Thank you, Mary. Questions, comments? Councilor McKenna and then Councilor Robinson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I'm trying to remember back to March. I think I'm being consistent. I'm quite sympathetic to the owners and to the tremendous investment that they made in that building. This is not just like the discussion we just had on the old water treatment plant. These are quite, not that all heritage, but they're all unique. But this was a showcase, a showpiece. I was sympathetic to his requests for let's say a better deal. And I was looking back at the 2017, and I'm not saying he was led to believe that he was getting anything different, but the potential there for a better arrangement for this particular building was there. I'm in favor of option 3. We did receive correspondence from Mr. Cinnamon, where he's really looking at this business model over the first 5 years as being very difficult as he transitions from commercial to residential, as is his plan. So I'm inclined to go with option 3 for that reason. When I look at the difference in taxes that the town would receive versus option 1, it's almost in the middle range. And so always looking for a compromise that would, it's not perfect, it won't make everybody happy, but I think that's where I'm landing, is on option 3. Thank you for this update, Mary. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for that. Councilor Robinson.
Thank you. I understand Mr. Cinnamon's trying to get as much as he can out of this program, and I don't blame him really, because he did invest a lot of money. I'm leaning heavily in agreeing with the staff recommendation of option 1, but I'm also kind of in agreement with Councillor McKenna that option 3 is something that we could maybe look at. We're still going to have a net increase of $473,833 over the dollars over the term of that agreement, from what we would have got had he not redeveloped the building. So it's almost, a 50-50 where he'd get a $539,000 rebate over 10 years, and the town would get 544. So it's almost it is a compromise, but I'm still leaning towards the staff recommendation. So anyway, that's all I've got to say.
Thank you. Your worship, you got your hand up there.
Yeah, thank you. Overall, I mean, I say this again. I'm sympathetic to the effort and the commitment that Mr. Cinnamon and his business made into the redevelopment of this property, and it's obviously one of the most prominent marquee properties in our downtown within our community. So I'm open to the suggestion that we somewhat front load the benefit of the grant, the increment, I guess. Now, I looked at the possibility, saying, well, what if we took the 469.68 and simply did that over 5 or 6 years? If we did over 5, we would be over the 80% in any single year. If we did it over 6, it would be about 77,000 per year, which is what he would expect in basically year 2 of the proposed agreements. So that would be my preference. Would be we take the 460 and simply advance it in a quicker fashion. So we could either do the maximum over 5 years with a small balance in year 6, or evenly over 6. I could probably also, if the consensus is we'll move ahead with option 3, I'm also comfortable with that as well. But I believe I recognize the upfront investment, and I see the merit in front loading the benefit here.
So that's option 2. Am I correct? You're talking about?
No,
Okay.
it would be similar to option 2, but year 6 in 2028 would just be a residual amount based on the total he would receive through option 1, which is a 460. So I'm supportive of 469.68, but paying it out quicker.
Okay. So it's
Option
a new
4.
option. Option 4, yeah, okay. Okay. Anybody else? Councillor Miller.
Thank you. Thanks, Mary. This is great work, and I appreciate the options, although it makes the decision a little more tricky. I was leaning to option 3 as well, but I think Mayor Panko's option 4 proposal makes a lot of sense. It helps front load the opportunity for this important investor, and he may appreciate that. So I would support that concept if the majority does.
Thank you. Councillor Quinn.
I have had a hard time getting my mind around this, but I am listening to the mayor, and I think there is room for an option 4, and maybe that's what could work really well, is doing another option up, and could be beneficial to everybody. Thank you, Sean, for bringing all that information forward for us.
Okay, thank you. I haven't heard from Councillor McGuire.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. I definitely agree with Councillor McKenna on this one. I think, especially in light of our water treatment plant discussions tonight, even with the maximum amount, the taxes are going from about 7,055 to 24,581, which is a huge increase. Not only that, the liability associated with having an empty building in the downtown is gone. There's a destination business in the commercial unit that is attracting people from all across Eastern Ontario, and there's really high quality accommodations above it. I think there was great compromises made between the Heritage Committee and at the time the CIP Committee to leverage a lot of improvements. And at this time, I think for me, option 3 would be the minimum. I'd be comfortable with option 2 if there was a consensus for it, but I'm okay with being a little more generous. And I really appreciate, Mary, this has been a really long-term file, so it's well presented tonight, and I appreciate all the work you put into it.
Okay, thanks. So your option 3, correct?
Yeah, 2 or 3 if there's consensus for it.
Okay. So I'll weigh in. Yeah, it's the whole idea is we're getting taxes that we would never get, regardless, and the investment is substantial. And so I've been watching this, and I've been watching a case in the city of Ottawa, and the city of Ottawa has a similar program, CIP program for the airport. And there was a proposal for a brand new hotel, and they were looking for a similar tax abatement to build their hotel, and they were turned down. And the mayor of Ottawa said, we don't put public money into private investment. And so, and he won the day. But, I acknowledge, this is different. The investment's been made. The carrot was put out there. It wasn't a promise, it was a carrot that we have this program. And that spurred things along. And so I'm more inclined to, in acknowledging at what the Cinnamons have done, which is fantastic, and want to help them out. I guess I had a question, and I think I asked it back in March, and I know the impact reassessment, because it's not residential, and I can't wait till it is. But Mary, can you say what that impact would be on them in terms of their impact assessment and what they would have to pay if it was residential, as we hope it will be?
So I unfortunately don't have those figures in front of me, but if council is interested, there was, the property was actually reassessed twice following the development of the property. The first reassessment was actually a mixed use assessment. So there was a small portion that was commercial and the rest of it was a large portion residential, as originally ended in 2017. So I can run some calculations and share that with council further interest.
I think as a general rule, we're going to say that if it does get classed as residential, the tax burden on the owner is less. Correct?
Yes, it did end up resulting in
Yes.
that.
So that's going to be advantageous hopefully when that happens. And I think that we talked about in your report, you talked about if it does happen, then we'll have another look at this. Is that correct too?
That is correct. We plan to write those terms into the agreements.
Yeah, so I'm happy with that. And I'm happy to acknowledge and accept the additional taxes that we're going to get out of this place and give them a break. But I'm more inclined to agree with the mayor on a compromise. And I think it gives them benefit and it's a win-win. And so I'm going to be an option 4 guy, which wasn't in our report, but we've come up with option 4 tonight. And so that would be me. And I think I have the mayor and Councillor Miller. And that's 3 of us. And I don't know if Councillor McKenna wants to speak to it, or Councillor McGuire or Councillor Robinson. They want to have another shot at it. But that's 3 and then 2 and 1, so. Anybody? Councillor McGuire.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. I think it's important to consider how this property fits into our downtown revitalization plan, how it fits into a lot of the strategic priorities that are listed. We still have empty lots and empty buildings in our downtown core. And I think this is going to set a big precedent for investment over the next 5 to 10 years to see, how these properties are going to become economical for people. I think that it's one we're showcasing, and I think that the whole reason why this program exists is that we weren't seeing this investment happen organically. So I think I'd rather send a stronger message where, if option 3 is a good compromise between the option 1 total and the option 2 total that the property owner prefers, for the sake of like the difference in amounts aren't that significant in the grand scheme of things. I think it's going to benefit the town in the long run to be a little more generous here and make a really good case study out of this for the next investor.
Okay, thanks for that. And I didn't mention that I forgot my dear colleague, Councillor Quinn, was an option 4 as well. So that's 4 of us. And I'll look for any comments, but I think we have a consensus. I'd like to see more of you on board, but Councillor Robinson.
Thank you. The reason that I was willing to go with option 3 was it's not really going to cost the town an awful lot more money. I mean, it's going to be another $70,000 as opposed to option 1. I'm kind of the opinion, that he has done an excellent job at refurbishing that building and has gone way over his budget. If I recall correctly from his presentation to us, we're still going to be getting over $544,000 over 10 years in tax, which we certainly wouldn't have been getting at all if he hadn't redeveloped the building. So like that was my thoughts for going with the 3rd. But I mean, if the general consensus with council members is option 4, I mean, I'll support it. Anyway, that's really all I wanted to say.
Well, if everyone's in agreement, I mean, I know we're not in agreement totally. I think we're in agreement with the fact that we want to acknowledge the investments been made. And I'm going on the fact that I think this should be a residential property. And it should be hopefully within the next 10 years, a lot sooner than that. And then that's going to help him out as well. So I'll just ask Mayor Pankop, can you reiterate what our option 4 is so it's clear to everyone that's watching and all the rest of it?
Sure. So what I suggested as a 4th option would be we take the total commitment in option 1, so 469.68. Essentially, that is what we had agreed, the formula we'd agreed on in principle, I believe, in 2017, and again earlier this year, in applying support in principle on a decreasing amount. So take the 469.68, take the 83,812 times 5 off of that. And we got a calculator handy. So 83,812 times 5, and then take the residual amount off the 460 and give it in year 6. It's not really a formula basis. It's a full commitment of the 80% for the first 5 years. And the balance in year 6.
So that'd be about a 40% abatement in year 6, and then it's over in year 7.
You did the math on it. I didn't, but.
Planner Mary, got
Close.
her hand up. And
Sorry,
see
through
how
you,
more-
Mr. Chair. Oh,
Yeah, it would leave, yeah, basically 40% in year 6.
so I was just gonna, sorry, through the chair, I was just gonna reiterate that I actually have an Excel spreadsheet used for this very reason. So 80% in the first 5 years and then 40% in year 6 would give us $460,968, which is the equivalent to the staff's recommendation in option 1, and it would be a 7-year abatement.
Okay. Works for me.
Yeah, me too. Let's see how Marcy want to add to that.
Just to reiterate, what's being proposed is not inconsistent with the policy, provided you don't exceed 80%, and you can do it between 0 years and 10. So essentially, you're maxing out 80% for the first 5 years, 40% for year 6, to arrive at the fixed rebatable amount. So it's an innovative way to look at it that's still very much consistent with the policy. So you're not setting an uncomfortable precedent here.
Okay. I think I probably should do a straw vote, and just so we're clear on that option that was just described in detail to us. So we'll do a thumbs up for whoever is good with that. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So that's done, and that will come forward. You can give me guidance at the next council meeting, perhaps. Yes. Okay, thanks for that. That was a good discussion, and I think everybody wanted to win on that. I think we got one. So Mary, you're gonna be up again, if I'm right with my arrows here. 8.3 will be the draft sign bylaw, right?
That is correct. So in this
Okay,
case,
awesome.
Mr. Granke will be presenting and I will be here to help field some questions.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good evening, committee. Staff are very pleased to bring forward for council's consideration and potential approval a new sign bylaw that would replace the often amended 1994 bylaw and propose a modernized approach while promoting good design, implementing provisions for the protection of properties containing buildings of historical significance, avoiding the overcrowding of non-residential facades, and promoting the use of quality materials and designs, and also to help streamline requests for exceptions from the requirements of the bylaw. So the draft bylaw does propose a number of process amendments that we feel are enhancements. As directed by council, staff have reviewed the draft bylaw with the Municipal Heritage Committee this past month and have also consulted with the Downtown Business Association. In the review, the MHC more specifically considered design within the heritage landscape of our downtown core, including internally illuminated or backlit signs, as well as mural signs, and avoiding the over-proliferation of signs. The committee also noted that new signs on designated heritage properties may constitute alterations as defined in the Ontario Heritage Act, which may open the door to an alteration permission. The MHC indicated support for the draft bylaw as written. The DBA feedback resulted in a friendly amendment to accommodate luminous window signs advertising open businesses, which is reflected in the report, and we appreciate the opportunity to make that tweak. The DBA did not outline concerns or objections to the proposed bylaw as a whole. So just to summarize some of the key points in the proposed bylaw. So we are implementing new provisions for signage within the downtown core to better achieve compliance with the downtown core design guidelines with respect to number, proportion, material, and lighting of signage. And an important change was defining parameters to allow staff approved exceptions for to the bylaw. So minor deviations to the bylaw, would now be delegated to staff to consider and potentially approve where it makes sense. Whereas previously, each proposed amendment or request for variance to the bylaw would be subject to council authorization, which did add some time to the process when those were made. We're proposing to exempt portable signs. They are currently administered as temporary signs and required to obtain an annual permit. We're proposing to incorporate broad design provisions for mural and window signs. So currently they're required to obtain a permit when serving as the primary business signage. And we are recommending that window and mural signs be exempt from a sign permit in most circumstances as they pose minimal liability to the town. And that's one of the reasons why the sign bylaw regulates signs. So mural signs would be not proposed to be included within the downtown core. However, there is the opportunity, the built-in opportunity for variances to allow that when it makes sense. The bylaw introduces a new section 13, which is the approval of entrance features on town-owned property close to, say, a subdivision or a new business park or something like that. We have had an inquiry for that a number of years ago, and we found that there is no way that those were regulated. So we're proposing some broad parameters there in the event that we do have a new subdivision that actually looks to make forward there. We're proposing design-oriented provisions relating to the number and size of signs to avoid overcrowding residential areas. We're updating the sign permit application fees and penalties for contravention. The permit fees are proposed to be a set fee depending on the type of signage and are considerate of the staff time involved in processing an application. Currently, fascia signs are the fee is set based on the size of the sign, and at the end of the day, the exact same amount of municipal time, effort, and resources are invested in inspecting and improving a fascia sign, regardless of whether it's 2 square meters or 6 square meters. So I think this change makes more appropriately aligns with the principle of cost recovery. We're proposing to remove provisions which regulate merchandise displays. At the end of the day, a merchandise display is similar to a patio or some sort of other temporary commercial occupancy of a public space, and we feel it would be more appropriate to regulate it that way. So that is being conveyed to the patio bylaw, which is proposed to be updated later on. And then also simply modernizing the language of the bylaw to incorporate some provisions into a user-friendly document. So I'd certainly acknowledge the work that Planning Clerk Mary Remig has put into to drafting the bylaw, as well as the assistance and feedback we've received from other departments and committees who've been consulted through the process. Our hope is that the new sign bylaw is an improved document that better streamlines the application process and also builds in some additional flexibility for business owners when they want to try something a little bit unique and distinct in the area. And our recommendation is that council approves the draft sign bylaw, subject to any revisions that may be requested by council. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councillor McGuire, then Councillor Miller.
Thanks, Carol and Mary. This is one of 2 big ones tonight that I know you guys have been working on for a long time, and I think this is going to be a really positive change in our community once it's implemented. And it can't come soon enough because we've had even businesses open since this has come out, and we haven't had it. So it's I'm excited to see it tonight. I've got a question just to help get it through my head. I know we've got some exceptions associated with 0.5 meters squared, 0.3 meters squared. Roughly, what does that look like? On like what dimensions are we talking when we use those numbers?
Mary?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Sorry, Councillor McGuire, do you mind telling me which dimension you are one at a time, I can give you a rough example or a rough estimate in inches or feet.
Sure, like, yeah, what would a 0.5 meters squared be in centimeters, maybe?
So 0.5 meters, so 0.6 of a meter is 2 feet. So you're looking at roughly 2.5 feet by 2.5 feet for 0.5 meters square.
Great, and then the 0.3 will be a bit, as long as, I guess it's been consulted with the DBA, so they're good. So then I've got some questions or ideas on some tweaks here. For 8.3, where the sign shall not project more than 1 meter from the exterior wall of the building. I think of when we think of the downtown and its glory days, there was all kinds of projecting signs coming off. I think of like the Gerbo sign that's still up. There used to be signs like that up and down the street. I'm wondering, just so we don't deter people, if somebody wants to build that, could we make it something like the sign shall not project more than 1 meter without designs by an engineer, or just a qualifier that says, you know, if you're putting a big sign out, it needs to be safe, but we don't want to discourage it if somebody wants to really put up a showcase sign somewhere. That was my first one. The second one was a concern with the awnings included in the it's 9.1, a maximum of 1 sign classified as an awning, canopy, or fascia sign. And I'm just wondering, will a sign like, I'm thinking like at the Gemmel's Flowers or at Smith's Shoes, where they've got an awning, and sometimes those awnings have logos on them, would that count as a sign, or is that separate from the fascia signs that are on those businesses?
Go ahead, Mary.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So that if there's no logo on it and it's just an awning, that doesn't meet the definition of a sign. That would be administered as an awning, not as a sign.
Okay, my preference would just be if, like, I think it's great to have those awnings downtown. They give shade and they improve the pedestrian experience in the summertime. But if somebody wants to put their logo on it, I don't think we should stop them. So that's something, if it could be tweaked to allow the awnings. I get we don't want it to be cluttered, but for those ones that roll up every night, I think it's okay. And then for the projecting signs in 8.3, number 7, I'd be okay if the signs illuminated externally. I'm thinking, you know, some applications it might work really well, some it might not, but that would be, maybe it's better to leave it like that. It leaves it to your discretion. It's just extra cost under the exception permit versus a normal permit. I really like the mural, the provision for the mural signs, because we know how much damage painting the brick can do. But we also know that, you know, there's some really great mural signs from 100 years ago, like the Davidson's Bread Building. So just to give that the extra set of eyes and have it have to go through the exception, I think is really good policy. And the last point I'm going to make is just on the, I want to put this climate lens in. We're always talking about this climate lens, and I want to apply it on this. And it comes down to the internally illuminated signs. I think it's a huge step forward that we're getting rid of those internally illuminated signs in the downtown core. But I think we should expand it to the whole town. When we think of the internally illuminated signs, they use a lot more energy because they've got to light up the open space, and they've got to stand out, project that light out instead of the light bouncing off the sign and lighting it up that way. And also they create a lot of light pollution. And if we think of consistency with our planning processes, I know when site plans used to come through council that it was really important that we'd ask for down-facing lighting. So if we're requiring new development to have the down-facing lighting for light pollution, but then we're allowing internally illuminated signs that are projecting that light off, 180 degrees from the sign location, it's just counterintuitive, or it contradicts each other, right? So for the sake of consistency with our other lighting, I think it's a good time to apply that to the town. I think it's a really easy choice when you're starting new. And this wouldn't start, everything grandfathered in right now would be fine. But I think it's just when we're looking at new development, it's a really easy choice in the planning process to make. And it's going to mean less energy use to light up the sign over the life of it. And it's also going to mean less light pollution, which is a win for our residents and the environment. So those are my comments, and I really appreciate getting this tonight. So thank you, Carl and Mary.
Thank you for that. If I don't forget, I think it was Councillor Miller who had their hand up. Sorry. Yep.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. And thanks, Carl and Mary. I know you've been working on this for a really long time, so it's great to see it come forward. And I'm sure you're thrilled to see it off your plate. So I wanted to start by saying I agree with Councillor McGuire's comments. I'm not sure how I feel about expanding it to the whole town without further consultation, but I did appreciate your other suggestions, Councillor McGuire. I did email Mary last week to confirm that existing signs will be grandfathered in and not required to comply with the policy unless they change or alter that. So I think that's very wise. And then I just wanted to ask, will you do some communication out to our business community to let them know about the new bylaw? I realize this has gone out to the DBA, but it might be wise to do something in plain language that outlines some of the key highlights of these changes, and just wondering if you'd be planning to do that.
Thank you. Will we be communicating? Yeah, go ahead, Mary.
Absolutely, that can for sure be done. Another intention is to actually develop a guideline with visuals to help businesses understand the different classifications of signs and determine what's needed for a permit and what's not required for a permit.
Okay. So go ahead, Councillor McKenna.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thanks for the report. I just wanted clarification regarding temporary signs. There's one section that talks about the 30 days, and then it talks about there's no maximum number of temporary signs, but on the other sign provision where you have multiple businesses on one property, you could have 6. For each business, up to 6 could have a sign. But there, in the temporary one, there didn't seem to be a max on that one. It's just, let's just use Sutler's Ridge, for example, multiple businesses. Every one of the businesses in there can have a temporary sign out on the road. But on the other one, when there's multiple business and it's a permanent sign, there's a cap on how many you can have, unless I've 6. I may have that mixed up, but just want to clarify. And I'm assuming it's complaint driven. We're driving around looking for.
It's a long bylaw, sorry.
Sign police aren't out there.
So I do believe you are correct. Using Sutler's Bridge though as an example, that would likely be, the word is escaping me, but the temporary signs that you put on the A-frame signs, the menu boards, portable signs, that's what I'm looking for. The word is portable signs. So I would administer that as a portable sign personally, and properties with large amounts of road frontage are limited based on the amount of road frontage they have. So we would only be allowing a certain amount based on a certain amount of road frontage in order to avoid sightline issues. We also have provisions with respect to site triangles. That property has frontage on 4 different streets. So there's also provisions in here with respect to site triangles and making sure that we leave any signs that are over 2 feet out of those sight lines so that we're not obstructing the view of motorists.
And there's also a provision around whether they're on town property or the business property. So it's complicated. And I know that we had the temporary sign bylaw before, or we're only grandfathering in the changes we've made. Anything that it pre-existed still, we're going to enforce it. If someone's not in compliance,
That's correct. Signs that are existing can continue to exist until changed or removed.
Great, thank you.
Thank you for that. Mayor Panko, you got your hand up.
Thank you. So I agree with some of Councillor McGuire's points. I guess projecting signs, I can see, I would be agreeable to larger than a meter. maybe perhaps 2 meters for that. And then also when it comes to the awning signs, or if an awning has the name of a business embroidered on it or painted on it, or it's part of the awning, I too would agree that that not be subject to the sign bylaw. And as for, I guess, the elimination of illuminated signs in different parts of town, yeah, I think we would need further consultation before we consider that, especially considering the national brands that we have around town, and more than may want to come. Other than that, fabulous. I think it's going to lead to some real positive change, and especially in our downtown.
You have your hand up, Councillor McKenna?
Yeah, I just want to just some sober second thought on the awning as a sign or an awning, because you can do some really wonderful things with an awning, and we could have a whole bunch of awnings with all kinds of remarkable things on them, and they'd be exempt from the sign bylaw. So I'm a little nervous about that one.
Okay, Councillor Miller. Back to you.
Sorry, thank you, Mr. Chair. The other question I'd had for Mary last week was based on some feedback from the DBA, and they were concerned about their open signs. So many businesses downtown have an illuminated open sign, and Mary has confirmed with me that those will continue to be permitted. Right, Mary?
That is correct.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think I read. Councillor McGuire.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I'm okay with keeping awnings in the sign bylaw. I just don't want to say we can only have one awning or one fascia sign or one canopy sign, as it says in 9.1. So that's all I'm not against, because they're structurally, they're overhanging the sidewalk. I'm definitely okay with us reviewing them, but just the fact that we can have both at the same time. And I think as per I appreciate the comments on more consultation on the internally illuminated signs. I'd love if there's consensus to go ahead with that. I know a lot of vacation towns or tourism towns, they've got big national chains. For example, Mont Tremblant, it's got a Canadian Tire, a McDonald's. They've got all this stuff out on the highway, but they've eliminated the internally illuminated signs in the design. And I think a higher quality sign comes out of it at the end of the day. So it's a win-win for the business and the municipality. So, yeah, those are my comments on that. Thanks.
Thanks. I think, I think we might be getting in the weeds a little bit. I think the bylaw is well written. I appreciate the comments that I've heard tonight. So I don't know if staff have picked up on some of those comments. I'm not opposed to them. I did have one question, which sort of occurred to me when I was reading it. There's no fees involved with real estate signs, right? Like houses for sale. I mean, that's not part of, well, I got that. Okay. So I'm fine with what my colleagues have been talking about. I think it's high time that this bylaw has been updated. And at the end of the day, coming to council, there's always been items that come forward, exception to the sign bylaw. We had one not too long ago for the hospital. So I think that, correct me if I'm wrong, part of this is going to give staff a little discretion to keep, it's going to be more defined, and we don't have to do that all the time. Is that right? Yes. So I support the bylaw. I support my colleagues' comments. And if there's nothing else, we can, Councillor McGuire.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. I'm just wondering, would it be possible to consult before this comes to council on the internally illuminated signs?
Who would you consult?
Councillor Miller, who I know you had was it the chamber in mind, or?
I did, yes.
Fine. I'm fine with that. Everybody fine with that? Okay, so it'll come back again. And then we'll have a new sign bylaw. Okay, I'll just check my agenda here. So we switched, we're at 8.4, proposed changes to provincial policy statement with Carl Grinke. You're busy tonight, Carl.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So this report summarizes proposed changes to the provincial policy statement, which is a guiding provincial policy document that articulates the province's objectives and priorities in land use planning, in which all municipal decisions need to be aligned. So in recent years, staff have reported to council on a number of proposed policy and legislation, including a new provincial policy statement in 2020, as well as bills 109 and 23, which were introduced last year, and incorporated significant changes to planning and development related processes and fees. So Bill 97, which incorporates the proposed amendments to the PPS and some other more minor in scope legislative amendments, is a functional successor that focuses on policy, and all of which are intended to further the province's goals as it relates to the Housing Supply Action Plan. So at this point, the draft PPS is available for consultation with feedback requested by the province by June 5th. So for council's information, staff are presenting some of the key changes in the PPS as it relates to Smith Falls, with accompanied discussion points that can go into a municipal response if council so chooses. So I'll just quickly go through those key points. Settlement area expansion, I think that's one of the ones that is potentially the most game changing in terms of our process, especially as it relates to the OP update that we're about to undertake. So the proposed PPS proposes to remove the requirement for municipal comprehensive review, and the municipal comprehensive review is the needs-based approach that we must follow in order to extend a municipal settlement area boundary, and that has a little a checklist that references population and growth projections, servicing assessment, and various other things that need to be done before we can extend our urban service boundaries to include rural lands. So the land need study that we procured last year was intended to fulfill part of those requirements. So now the proposed PPS proposes to that municipalities should consider sufficient capacity in existing and planned infrastructure, and that specialty crop areas and agricultural lands should be avoided and phasing should be provided. But there is no longer a need for a comprehensive a municipal comprehensive review. So that does make that does make it easier for a municipality to extend its urban service boundaries. And additionally, the proposed PPS proposes that the planning horizon that guides long-range decisions regarding land use be extended from up to 25 years to at least 25 years. So the land need study that we'd undertaken forecasted 25-year growth projection based on the 2020 PPS, which was in effect when the land need study was initiated, and still is today. And the land need study focused on the overall number of housing starts, employment lands, and various other metrics over that 25-year projection. So we can still do that 25-year projection. We're just no longer bound by it in the same way. So none of these changes prevent a municipality from doing its own planning focused on a needs-based analysis. However, the risk to the municipality is that in the event a development is deemed by council to not be in the municipal interest due to long-term costs or any other reason, it may be harder to defend that decision if it is appealed. So for instance, if we see a proposal that is further afield, is not immediately adjacent to our urban service boundaries, and we're asked to extend pipes out there, there is that uncertainty. If we were to say no, it may be harder to defend that. We don't know. Obviously, that hasn't been tested yet, but it's nice to have that flexibility, and I welcome that flexibility, but there is also that risk. So it is my recommendation that clearer direction be provided in the new PPS to provide additional certainty to municipalities and developers. So my recommendation is that we reestablish language calling for boundary extensions to be logical and sequential, thereby avoiding leapfrog development. And again, this is provincial policy. This is high level. It allows us to still interpret and implement that on a local basis. Also, more strongly consider financial viability over the life cycle of infrastructure and service and public service utilities, and considers how to accommodate the development while protecting other provincial interests. The proposed changes also make it difficult to plan for infrastructure without detailed population employment projections that identify growth needs. So it would be helpful for us as decision makers to have some direction as to how those can be reconciled, as a lack of direction can lead to unpredictable outcomes in the event of an appeal. Residential and development and intensification. So the changes with respect to in that section ultimately appear to continue a trend regarding the deregulation of residential development. So it recommends that the proposed PPS would remove the requirement for municipalities to establish minimum density targets within settlement areas, while allowing municipalities to establish targets based on local conditions. It permits and facilitates all types of intensification, including the conversion of existing commercial and institutional buildings for residential use, and also removing the requirement to establish development standards for intensification, which minimize the cost of housing and facilitate build form while maintaining appropriate levels of public health and safety, which is in the current PPS. So a fundamental shift to allow for local planning control is helpful. It allows us to explore different models of growth in a Maiden-Smith Falls aspect. However, the risk, of course, is that it can lead to more uneconomical urban sprawl and some unpredictability. If every municipality if no municipalities do land needs based at urban settlement area boundaries, it creates more supply than can ever be possibly used, and that introduces some uncertain outcomes for land economics. At the end of the day, staff are generally supportive of the intent of the changes. However, we encourage that the PPS should allow for municipal autonomy to enforce areas of specific local interest. So, for instance, in our downtown core, we have policies that support commercial development on the ground floor. So I think the municipality should continue to have the ability codified in the PPS to, if we so choose, to implement and identify those, sort of protect those local interests and resources that we want to, as well as limit and phasing intensification where costly infrastructure upgrades would be required. So I think there's some benefit to allowing additional flexibility for the municipality here. However, I think there are some reasonable guardrails that can be put on there that would allow us to better plan for our own interests. Affordable housing, there is the PPS proposes to remove the definition of affordable as it pertains to both rental and home ownership. So the current PPS identifies affordable based on income and market, on household income, as well as market and rental rates, and specifically requires municipalities to provide a range of housing, including affordable housing. It doesn't get into a lot of detail about how that's done, but at least it is articulated as a priority, and it gives the municipality something to strive for. So in this case, that has been removed as a specific item. So, of course, this does not prevent municipalities from creating our own definition of affordability. And there's merit to that. We are a large province with diverse needs. However, the removal of this concept as something specifically in there is challenging, as ultimately as all levels of government, or at least provincial and municipal, certainly have responsibility to enable housing supply that addresses the needs of all Ontarians. So our recommendation is that, or the staff recommendation is that a housing section reference a need for municipalities to consider affordability in policy as part of a complete community. So land use compatibility in employment areas, there are a couple of changes there. One is that it softens the language that regarding the separation between sensitive uses, say residential, from industry or some of those larger industry, major transportation, the sort of land uses that create greater impacts. So rather than now being a sort of a last case scenario that unless there's no other option, these uses need to be separated, it allows these uses to be closer together, provided they can be appropriately mitigated and managed, and there'd be ultimately additional provincial legislation and policy that guides that. So similar to residential, employment land conversions to other designations can no longer only be done through a comprehensive review. So presently, a comprehensive review, as identified earlier, is needed to add or subtract land from our business park as a designated employment area. So it's a little bit easier to do that with this. And the proposed policies also scope the range of permitted uses in employment areas to remove institutional, commercial, retail, and office uses unless those are associated with a primary employment use. So the first two of these changes increase the flexibility in terms of planning for or around designated employment areas. And I think there is some merit to that in Smith Falls. We do have designated employment areas that include individual singular properties surrounded by different land uses. So I think having that ability and that flexibility is helpful in certain circumstances. I think it's very important that we protect and provide for employment areas as a whole. And that would certainly be my recommendation as we move through the official plan. So staff support the need for employment lands to be protected for long-term use, and that's a general statement that we can convey as a comment. Staff are also supportive of scoping the permitted uses in employment lands to focus on their core function. However, we would support revising the definition to allow the flexibility to include certain standalone uses, such as offices that support the core uses identified in the PPS. And that would allow for some more flexibility and latitude for a business park to evolve to meet the needs of our employers. Natural heritage systems, that is a section of the provincial policy statement that relates to provincially significant wetlands, woodlands, valley lands, species at risk from a land use planning perspective, that whole range of ecosystem based planning. And we don't quite know what's going to be happening there. The proposed PPS removes that altogether with a statement that natural heritage policies remain under consideration by the government and that future policies will come forward at some point in the future. So we're being asked to consider the entire new PPS without natural heritage policies. And my concern with that approach is that this is a fundamental and unique aspect of land use planning, and that good planning requires an assessment of all of these policies together and in order to inform a complete and thorough decision. So while I'm providing comment and review on all of the other PPS sections, it's difficult for me to really provide a meaningful assessment of everything without natural heritage policies. So I think we've certainly seen and staff have seen feedback from other municipalities that recommend that the new PPS is premature without natural heritage policies in place for us to have that wholesale consideration. And I would agree with that. I think that in my opinion, that should be included. And if so directed by council, I can provide that comment as part of our review. So climate change. There aren't a lot of significant changes in climate change. However, the new policies appear to be largely similar in intent to the previous policies. However, there are some sections that de-emphasize waste management or allow more scattered low impact or low density housing, which appears contrary to climate objectives. So I think my broader suggested discussion point here is that we'd recommend that policies and tools supporting climate resilience and adaptation be woven throughout the PPS to highlight the role that province and municipalities can play. So recommend a greater emphasis on compact development, appropriate location of transit intensive uses, waste management, and green development standards and techniques to assist municipalities in achieving their own reduction changes. The PPS, there's a range of other changes that affect other municipalities more than our own, including large and fast-growing municipalities, as well as agriculture policies. Some of our rural colleagues certainly have comments with respect to the proposed residential policies in agricultural areas and potential land use conflicts that may arise there. And certainly I would defer to the expertise from our rural colleagues in responding to those particular points. So I think in summary, this is a fairly substantial policy approach that's being proposed for our consideration, and I'm just highlighting some of the aspects that more specifically would affect Smith Falls. The timing, of course, is interesting with our OP update coming right up. So I think the broad flavor of the proposed changes is that it would allow for greater flexibility in local decision making. That is helpful for a town such as ours that has seen a lot of development in recent years. They don't prevent us from exceeding the standards and targets set out in the PPS. However, the corollary is that it may be harder to say no and defend the decision if there is a proposal that's not good planning or financially sustainable for the municipality. So I'll leave it there, and certainly this report is presented for council's information, and there are a number of discussion points that are referenced in the report, and certainly I'll welcome council's direction as it relates to potentially setting a response to the province. So I'll leave it there, Mr. Chair, and welcome any feedback.
Thank you, Carl. Comments or questions for receiving this report? I have Councilor McGuire and then Councilor McKenna.
Thanks a lot, Carl. I fully support your feedback that you've put in. I've got real issues when I don't even like using the term natural heritage anymore when we talk about this stuff. When we look at our parks or our stormwater infrastructure, they're assets, and we look at them as assets and they depreciate in value, and then we reinvest in them and we renew them. When we look at the natural heritage features, I think natural infrastructure is a term that's gaining a lot of ground, and I think it's more accurate. And the great thing about natural infrastructure is it doesn't require the similar amount of investment that all of our under street infrastructure takes, that our parks and recreation. We have to continually be investing in that to keep it up to date. When we pave over these features and we use the excuse of needing to build homes faster to eliminate these features, then we take them from being maintained in the natural environment with minimal intervention to something that has to be maintained year over year in perpetuity as long as that community exists. And I think it's short-sighted when we're looking at long term to lose those assets, and I think we need to look at them as assets. I also think it's not doing enough to protect productive farmland, where we've got a limited supply of farmland, and but it's easy to build on, and there's lots of houses going up on it. So I appreciate all the work you've done to examine it, and I hope that your comments are received and appreciated in Toronto.
Thank you, Councilor McKenna, and then the mayor's got his hand up as well.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and Carl, great job. I too support a lot of your all of your suggested staff comments. I guess the question, and I'll come back to it, is you're being very diplomatic in the feedback to the province, which is our normal. It is an ongoing relationship between the province and municipality. But where you feel, or where staff really feel, and if council supports it, that language needs to be beefed up, or more, have some more oomph, then I would like to see that. It's a very diplomatic, it almost gets lost, and they're very important things you're saying there. So a good editor on your response, I'm sure Mr. Morris could help with that. Just there is a time when you have to walk that rope between the tight rope, but where some of these things are really critical. So don't be afraid to be blunt, is what I guess I'm trying to say. The other thought I had is it is customized for the town of Smith Falls, your responses, and I appreciate that. And I just wanted to be, so I could put it in context, under the residential development and intensification. For example, if the former Rita Regional Center property were to come forward with a development with a minimum number of houses and with no real timelines of what they're going to do, but the town would be expected to bring in the infrastructure to connect that, we would have the right today to say, no, you either phase that or there's a minimum number before we're going to start doing that work. Your report is suggesting that those minimums or that phasing might be lost, that authority that we have could be lost to us. And a developer could say, no, is that, not to pick on that former land of the Rita Regional Center, but is that what you're trying to tell us?
Well,
Through you, Mr. Chair, the way the PPS is structured right now, and the way our land needs study was done to sort of follow along those same lines, it suggests that we have, let's say, I don't know the exact number offhand, but maybe 100 acres of new residential land would need to be opened up beyond what's currently available within our urban service boundaries. So that would, so based on that, the PPS would allow us to authorize or open up, say, 100 acres of that property or a different property if council wants to direct that growth somewhere else. But we would be limited to that. We can still think about how we want to see infrastructure go over the rest of the site, but we would be limited to designating that until, say, that we did another land needs study at somewhere in the future when that first 100 acres is filled up. So the proposed PPS proposes us a little bit more flexibility, which is nice. I think that's welcome. It gives us a little bit more of an ability to think long-term about how we want all of that land or perhaps other land to be planned to accommodate that development. It makes it a little bit, it gives us the ability to think about how we're going to be phasing and planning roads, pipes, all of those elements of planning that in conjunction with the actual land needs itself. So I think that flexibility is helpful. The PPS doesn't give us direction as to how those are all going to be interwoven, but we can do that as a municipality. The risk we have is that if a hypothetical developer either there or somewhere else says that, well, we want land at this far end of that site or somewhere else that's not as we'd phase, that's different from how we'd envisioned it to be phased, that would potentially be more costly for us to service and to run pipes to and to maintain those services over time as they depreciate. Perhaps that's not the most economical way for us to phase that development. There is always the risk that it may be harder for us to say no, or if we can say no, you're not going there, you're going somewhere else, we may lose that element of control and could potentially go on appeal if softer PPS policies sort of impede our ability to regulate growth that way. So we don't know how it can turn out that way, but from my reading of the policy, there is that risk. So that would be my primary concern with how it's proposed right now. Does that answer your question, Councillor?
If I may, Mr. Chair, yes, it does. I was trying to take your really very well-written report and apply it in real life situations at Smith Falls so that I could understand it better. And that's an excellent example. And that's where I would want to be blunt, because that would be, what costly and poor planning. We don't know if the developer, if they put it at the far end and nothing in between ever gets developed, we're sitting on assets that we paid for that are underutilized and we can't recoup the cost. So I was just trying to So that's where I would be really blunt with that. That's one example, and I'm sure there are others in here. I don't want to go through them, but the last thing I would say is that, again, on the same area of residential development intensification was around we've just had a report saying that commercial property, we have a surplus, and they're suggesting that options to convert that to residential will be encouraged. If not, it will be more difficult for us a municipality to limit a conversion. And you're suggesting maybe ground floor only. I'm supporting, if we have a surplus, to use that property, that commercial property or institutional property, get it into the residential market. I guess my question is, we have tools to accelerate that and be deliberate to help make that happen. And we could cross that bridge, I guess, when they come back with the actual legislation and we see what the changes are. But on one hand, we've got a surplus of commercial, and another, we have a need for more residential. This looks like it's going to make that easier, that conversion. So I'm on the surface, I'm happy with that.
Okay, thank you. Mayor Penko?
Yeah, does CEO Morris want to comment first on the previous inquiry before you move to me?
I could certainly do that, Mr. Chair, if you wish.
Yep.
Yeah, I think as a general statement, what Carl has captured is there's far too much uncertainty in this draft document, too much gray, far too much gray for anyone's comfort. So I think we can provide a more assertive expectation that they provide clarity. It's very difficult to predict what the implications could be when the language is such that we can't predict. We can't come up with a scenario to match their description. So I think there's a lot of technical content here, but I would say overarching messages: be clear, so we know exactly what we're up against.
Carl, you had your hand up.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. And further CEO Morris's comments, I'm also noted down Councillor McGuire's comments, especially with respect to the emphasis on natural infrastructure. And I think one area that I do feel strongly is, in the absence of detailed consideration of this, it's difficult to provide that wholesome response without all of with that key element of land use not being part of here, while recognizing that the comments that we provide may not necessarily be taken in. But I think that an emphasis on natural infrastructure as an asset, or an appreciating asset compared to so many other assets that we own and maintain, I think is a key point, and certainly one that I will build upon in the response that I provide.
Thank you. Go ahead, Mayor.
Yeah, thank you. Well, there are a few, I guess, encouraging and positive steps here. I think there, as has been illustrated, a number of reasons for us to be concerned. And I guess part of me wonders what's the motivation for some of these changes, and what's the intent of some. And we have seen over the last couple of years with the current government, sometimes we get these sort of trial balloons that float along. We don't maybe expect there's going to be a major negative coming out of it, and sometimes there are. And I've seen that with the conservation authorities in my role there with the RBCA over the previous term, and some changes this term as well. And to Councillor McGuire's point, I mean, if we are eliminating the entire section related to natural heritage and our natural infrastructure, what's the intent? And I would suggest the intent there is to have the ability to pave paradise and put up a parking lot, as an example. The ability to place development in areas where we would prefer development not to occur, and us not having the ability to argue against that, or even having decisions potentially appealed. And that the natural heritage systems need to be preserved. And if it's not in there, I think it's deeply, I think is deeply concerning. We should be definitely concerned about that. The removal of the term affordable housing, hugely disappointing. I mean, so go back. What is the intent? Why are they removing that term from the PPS? And let's remember, a recent study by the county told us once again, 25% of our citizens are having difficulty affording their homes. They're paying more than 30% of their income towards housing. And that's an environment where we know we have supply coming, which will help. Anybody who is having a difficult time affording their home today and is forced to move in the coming years will have a harder time at that point. So we have to make sure, do what we can to ensure that term remains in there. It affects 1 in 4 of our citizens. The point on climate change is very light. And of course, if we're removing natural heritage and natural infrastructure, we are actually making our fight against climate change more difficult. We're potentially leading to worse and more damaging outcomes if we do have significant weather systems, which we know are happening everywhere on a very frequent basis. So there's so much to be disappointed with here, other than, Carl, your deep analysis and your comments, which are very encouraging and positive, but I just wonder if it will be enough. And I don't know what's happening across the province, what kind of feedback is being submitted to the province, but I hope it's consistent with our feedback here. And perhaps if this is not totally settled by June, if there's an opportunity for us to push this further and have a conversation with the minister at the AMO conference, and perhaps we can seek that as well. But good job, Carl.
Thank you. Thank you, Carl. And I love your passion for planning. and I hear a lot of planning talk these days, and you know, it's I'm getting used to the language, and I really appreciate this this report that you've come out with, and you know, I agree with my colleagues that if you don't speak up, then you cannot say that you got me. So I'm wondering if this is an issue. I haven't seen anything from AMO about this, and I see the comment period is over on June 5th. Is there any indication of when they want to do some sort of legislation? I would assume it would be the fall, but I'm not sure. Carol, do you know?
Mr. Chair, no, I don't know. What I've been hearing is that they're hoping that the PPS would take effect at some point in the fall. I think it's a fair statement that there's less. I've seen less in terms of less responses from a lot of sorts of agencies, groups, organizations, OPP, Professional Planners Institute, the organizations that would normally comment on these. I've seen less of that. I've seen less media interest in the new PPS, and some of it may be that there's been a lot of policy changes. A new PPS just a couple years ago, Bill 23 that received a lot of attention, Bill 109 a few months earlier than that. Many of those aren't even in effect yet. So there may be some element of fatigue just in terms of processing the large number of process and legislative changes. However, certainly before I finalize the report to meet the ministry's deadline, I can take one more scan and see if we're inspired perhaps by something that a different organization has put out closer to the 5th.
Yeah, and I suspect that we'll have an opportunity to, if you want to do a delegation, it's a great idea. But definitely get your comments in, and yeah, I kind of agree with Councillor McKenna. Don't pull any punches, and you know, and I think that I think everyone's in agreement with that. Are we? So there you go. Thank you very much. We've received that, and you've given the okay to go at it. So we've moved 8.3 to 8.5, and that you're still here. The official plan residential development monitoring report with you, Chief Planner Grenke.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As council begins work on our next update to the official plan, you will be asked to set some key and foundational growth targets, which will inform development decisions that will guide us in the future. While the upcoming presentation of the land need study will answer questions about how much growth we will be expecting to see, there will be some important decisions about where that growth will be and how much land we set aside for greenfield urban expansion, and how much of that we expect to be infill development, and where we want to see where we want to target growth. If there are parts of the town where we really want to see make it easier to develop. So building on the theme from the report that was just presented, as well as the land need study presentation that will be coming to council in a couple of weeks, and to set the stage for all of that work, it's appropriate to take stock of where we are now and what we've done over the life of our current official plan, the 2014 official plan. So that's built around an important community vision that supports the transformation of strategically identified and historically underutilized areas, and supports the regeneration into higher density development that's more financially sustainable to service and more compact, which facilitates more efficient service delivery and more sustainable in terms of walking and cycling. So to support the broad vision of the OP, the plan contains some policies that encourage infill development and intensification in areas where the services already exist, as well as opportunities for higher density development to meet a wider array of housing needs. It's important to highlight that these policies were created at a time where we've seen very limited housing development, and maybe a dozen or so new homes a year, and almost all of which were single detached homes, and generally where new infrastructure was getting installed to service them. So the policy supported an evolution to a more fiscally, environmentally sustainable pattern of development, not as an either or, but instead offering support for different forms of development. So those policies were written at a different time in our evolution as a town, but they're certainly very prescient in terms of what we've seen over the last number of years. So the plan does identify targeted growth areas, which include downtown and the surrounding neighborhoods, and the northern uptown part of town, which is close to many amenities, but also a lot of historically underdeveloped areas, including along Cornelia, Maisie, Elmsley, and Center Street, of course. The plan identifies a target of 25% of new residential development to occur within those areas. And that's a very aspirational goal. There's intensification policies that support that, but I think that's an aspirational goal that reflected certainly sort of a pattern and location of development that has not been historically prevalent, at least in the years leading up to that OP. So in the preparation of this report, planning staff carefully reviewed residential building permit information since 2014 to assess the kinds of housing that have been approved. So what building permits have been issued, and most importantly, where they've gone. And the results have been quite interesting. So according to our data, only 9% of new housing starts are within their targeted growth area, and that's far short of the identified target. However, it's also important to note that the targeted growth area indicates generalized areas of the town and are not meant to be defined in a precise manner based on individual property streets or other specific areas. So there are those blue blobs that you can see on Schedule 8 of the report. Some of them overlap, but all just generalized areas that have been targeted in the OP. So we've also broadened the analysis to include neighboring lands within proximity. So we've identified a buffer of 200 meters, which covers lands with similar planning considerations and impacts. And that targeted growth area plus the 200-meter buffer includes almost all of the built-up area of the town north of the Rideau River and Chamber Street. So close to a third, or about 31% of residential building permits have been issued within this combined geographic area. And that's our serviced, urbanized part of the town where I think that sort of development would really be quite welcomed. And the vast majority of these units represent apartment dwellings constructed on infill lots. So the Lapine development, for example, is just outside that targeted growth area, but for all intents and purposes, it is accessible by pedestrian to the shops and services downtown. So functionally, it is the sort of development, sort of part of town where we want to see more intense development based on that access. Another thing our analysis identified was that 60% of new housing units constructed in the town since 2014 were apartment dwellings. And that's a very significant shift from the pattern that guided the 2014 policy, where almost 100% of housing starts were singles. So most of those units were in a small number of development projects that were approved since between 2020 and 2022. Roughly another fifth of these units that we've seen since 2014 are townhouses, the majority of which are owner-occupied dwellings in the Bellamy Farm subdivision, but there's a couple of rental developments as well. So townhouses are a pretty significant part of the housing mix in other urban municipalities, both as starter homes as well as in the bungalow format. They provide a more accessible housing option as well. They've not been a significant part of our housing mix until very recently. So perhaps this form of development is catching up with that demand. Only about a fifth of housing starts are single detached dwellings, mostly in our subdivisions. So the raw number of singles we've seen in the last few years is roughly consistent with what we've seen beforehand. It's just a much lower number based on the much larger amount of higher density forms of development we've seen. We do anticipate with an increase of single family dwelling zoned lots in the final approval of Maple Ridge and the Bellamy Farm phases that there will be an opportunity to increase the supply of singles in the coming years. So with all of that said, it's helpful to note that while low density residential development constituted only 20% of dwelling units since 2014, that form of housing took up 60% of new residential lands that were developed. So it is low density housing, of course, uses up a lot of land, even though you're not creating as many new units. So while this report is presented for council's information, the information will help inform some residential policy decisions that will flow out of our OP update. For example, council may wish to assess our intensification targets, the boundaries of targeted growth areas, as well as regulatory tools that we can use to undertake the sort of residential development that aligns with council's objectives. So while market conditions that drive housing demand are impacted to a large extent by factors beyond municipal control, the town will, on an ongoing basis, need to assess community housing needs, the effectiveness of housing-related policies, as well as our broader role in this sector. And having that having the information that outlines where we've been and what we've done in the last few years helps establish a very useful baseline that will enable us to more effectively plan for where we want to be and what we need to do to get there. So I'll welcome any feedback and comments on this information report, Mr. Chair.
Thanks so much, Carl. Comments? Mayor Panko.
Yeah, thanks, Carl. Very insightful and I guess encouraging. And we look at the starts we've had since 2015, and I think, I'm not mistaken, about 390 of those were actually last year, approved permits through last year. And intensification in recent years has been much greater than what we've previously experienced. But your comment that we've used up a lot of our existing residential land, there's another phase coming for the Bellamy Farm subdivision. We've got the Wood Avenue extension, but understanding the More Homes Built Faster objectives of building 1.5 million homes in Ontario over the next 10 years. If you do that on a per capita basis, that works out to about 1,000 homes in Smiths Falls, or about 100 a year. So if we can count to what was started last year, we're well on our way. But if you take the overall 7-year average of 730 over the 7 years, about 90 a year, we're slightly behind where we need of what we need to do over the next decade. And I think what we've experienced so far is a lot of that infill, a lot of development land that had been under plans of subdivision in the past and currently under plans of subdivision now. So the next phase is going to be more challenging. In other words, coming up with enough development land outside of, say, the Gallipold Center, which is a lot there, fulfill our goal. So does that objective by the province form part of our official plan? Do we set targets based on that objective? And do you know, maybe not off the top of your head, but do you know what we would have available for development with the lands that are currently prepared for development? Understanding the Galapagos Center is still not within the settlement areas, I guess.
Carl?
So thank you, Mr. Chair. So the OP as structured presently has almost all of the land that's available for ready development in the town. It has been either developed since 2014 or planned for development through the draft approved subdivisions. There are a few acres here and there throughout the town, but not a meaningful amount. So I think we're at this point, we're almost at the limit of what the OP currently provides and plans for residentially. So I think this OP update is important, is that's going to set the new limit. That's going to, I guess, the next frontier, if I can put it that way, for residential development. So the current frontier under our new official plan includes the Bellamy farmland, the Ferreira Meadows lands, the Wood Avenue, and some other parts here and there in the town that are almost all used up. We've pretty much gotten to we've exceeded the growth projections for 2014 that we were expected to by 2034, which has certainly bumped up this update process to where we're at right now. So I think through this upcoming process, we'd be working with a bit of a blank slate and identifying our new sort of the new parts of town where we can achieve that objective. And I believe the land needs study is calling for about 1,300 residential units over the next 25 years. So that's perhaps a bit more aggressive than, a bit less aggressive than the 1,000 new units in the next 10 years. But I think council certainly, as indicated in the previous report, and assuming the new PPS is approved and something similar to the form in which it's presented right now, council will have some flexibility, or a fair bit of flexibility, in terms of where we want to draw those residential boundaries and where we want to put them.
Carl, and another great report.
Councilor McGuire?
Thanks, Mr. Chair. And yeah, thanks a lot, Carl. It's great after seeing all these permits come through the system and gets built and everything changing over the last few years, to get this chance to kind of look back and see, okay, how did it work on a highest level? One thing I take away from it is that when I look at the Lapine building, beautiful piece of development built on an existing infrastructure, infill, but it could have been much higher, and I think still respected the character of the neighborhood. And I'd like to see, going forward, as we make changes to our official plan, of how we can encourage that kind of intensification when you've got a big lot and you've got a high quality design, how to really get the most out of it. Because as Mayor Pankos notes, it's we've got really high numbers to meet those targets, and I think there's some opportunities there to get more intensification when we build those big projects out.
Thank you. Thanks, Carl. It is encouraging, but and I think you've expressed it, that we're running out of space, and just to think outside the box, there may come a day that our governance might be questioned. We have a county of, there's 9 municipalities with 9 councils, 9 CEOs, 9 everything. Someday someone may say you're going to have to fix that. So that might be an opportunity at that time, but who knows? But yeah, I mean, we need more land, and I think that we're far exceeding what I ever dreamt of, as far as the number of starts that we've got going. And you know, the province, you know, has said whatever the number they want done. I think that, you know, in our case, that might be more Toronto centric, because the expectation of immigration and that sort of thing puts pressure on, and they don't have the room. And we, I think we're doing pretty good. And I appreciate the report. It was very interesting reading. Anybody else? Thank you, Carol. And I think you're done. So 8.6, Integrity Commissioner Annual Report with Clerk Costello.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As council is aware, we have newly refreshed our code of conduct and reappointed Tony Fleming as the town's integrity commissioner. As such, this is an annual report that Mr. Fleming prepares for council to be in compliance with the Municipal Act. In this report, he details any activity that he's undertaken for the town of Smiths Falls. Outlined in the report, you can see that there was minimal costs associated with advice, $226 for 2022, and there was no complaints filed in 2022, so that there was no costs for any of his investigations. Again, this is an annual report, looking for council to receive the report formally at our next meeting of council via resolution.
Thank you. Thumbs up. And I can say that Mr. Fleming is an impeccable professional, and he's there for us anytime that you have a question. So we're lucky to have him, and that'll come forward. Does that have to go to council?
It'll go to council to formally receive the report at
Okay.
our next meeting, beginning of June.
Okay, thank you. 8.7, Smith Falls for all terms of reference report with you, Clerk Costello, again.
Thank you. Bringing this forward, this is the terms of reference that we've developed for a committee called Smiths Falls for All. This is kind of a addition to, or in addition to the Racism and Discrimination Task Force that existed in the previous term of council. So we're looking to have this group formally appointed, and they would look at advancing the work that our Racism and Discrimination Task Force did in the previous term of council. In the report, there is a draft terms of reference that we drafted, and I thank Mayor Panko as well as Peter McKenna for giving input into this. So this committee would come up with a mandate, and they'd research and prepare the mandate and a feasible work plan, and that they would be done in a yearly cycle, so that council would be apprised via report of their activities. But we're looking for the committee to advance any of the town's efforts to develop a diverse and inclusive community that provides equity to all citizens. So I would ask Mayor Panko if council concurs to maybe just speak a little more to it. We tried to use some other discrimination or diversity and equity terms of reference, but we wanted to develop our own unique to Smiths Falls. So that's what's in front of you this evening. I'd let Mayor Panko add anything, because I'm sure I have could maybe miss some of the finer points that he would like to bring out. We have already appointed 2 members, council appointments for this committee, and we'd be looking for a minimum of 3 citizen members. So once formally adopted, we would go out and advertise for membership.
Okay, thank you. Mayor, do you have anything to add?
Not a lot. I think Clerk Costello did a good job of putting this together, and essentially those of us who were on council before or have followed it, having the Racism and Discrimination Task Force, it operated over a couple of years and made a number of recommendations that we're sort of in the process of implementing. This carries the ball from here, many of those recommendations. And so I think it's important that we have a good representation on the committee and basically advance the community in ways we want to see it advance. And to Carrie's comments, I think it's important that we have the community help define the mandate rather than predetermining among a small group of people here what that mandate should be.
Thank you. Thumbs up, and that's you'll be advertising for the committee after our council meeting that adopts the terms of reference.
Correct.
And then you have 3 members of the committee from the community, but that's just a minimum, so there could be more.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
We wanted
okay.
we wanted to keep it open. We'd, anybody who's interested.
Yes, okay, so great. So that'll come forward at the next council meeting.
Thank you.
So thank you for that. Finally, 8.8, final approval of Town of Smith Falls Strat Plan 2023 to 2026 with CEO Morse.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It's Policy Palooza night in Smith Falls tonight, and this is certainly not the least of the policies that you'll have considered. So I'm absolutely delighted to present to you the final draft of the strategic plan for this term of council. I had reported back on April 3rd about the work we had done in terms of starting with, of course, the session that council and staff had back in January. We did public consultation, we had a stakeholder group, and then we had a staff session as well. So I can assure you there was lots of public and stakeholder participation in this process, and that's what makes a good, strong, supportable strategic plan. So my suggestion is you've done a good job at that. So in here, the 6 priorities that were originally identified have not changed from what we came up with in January, but they have been refined a little bit of wordsmithing. And our focus really has been on the initiatives that support each of the strategic priorities. So we've gone through it as staff to just kind of a final reality check to understand that could someone pick this document up and understand in clear terms what we're hoping to achieve, and will we know when we get there? And that's really important. Sometimes, you know, councils can head down a path and really not understand when you've arrived. So we've attempted to provide performance measures or measurements that allow us to understand when we've completed the task. So you'll see that all in the attachment to the report. But what I would point out are a couple of things. The long-term vision, we added a couple of items, items 7, 8, and 9 on page 3 of the report. Those were items that were identified early on. We kind of rolled them around and came up with the wording that you see in the report. So we believe that represents what you intended them to be. Tonight would be a good time to talk about them if they're not capturing what you wanted. But what I would say is there are some changes here. There are 5 changes. So I won't go through all 27 initiatives, but more than happy to talk about individual ones if you wish to. But what I would point out is from the consultation that we did, there were several things that made it into the final draft. So we'll start with priority number 1. I would refer you to the appendix to the report if you have it available. First change is initiative 1.3, the review of roads and sidewalks. So that's underway. And we felt it was important that once we do the review, it transitioned into something actionable. And that document would be a road needs study, which would also include sidewalks. So we added the language to kind of round out that initiative and make sure we have a deliverable product that we can then embed into our asset management plan. So Director McMunn is on board with this. In fact, it was his suggestion that we add that last piece to close the loop on that initiative. The next would be 1.5. This is a new one. It did not appear before we did the public consultation. What we heard is that mobility is important to people in town, and as we grow, it may magnify in importance. So committee members may know that we use the services of Lanark Transportation Association. They provide bus service. It's not fixed route, it's appointment only. And people need to register for that service. It works very well. It's meant primarily for appointment-based trips. And I think it serves that purpose reasonably well. What we heard is that people felt there was a need for more mobility options for things other than medical appointments. What we're suggesting here is that we have a look at that in 2026 to the extent we do transit needs study. It doesn't mean you would end up with a transit system, probably not a conventional transit system, but an opportunity to look at different options, mobility options for people in town. And there are different ways of doing that based on, kind of scheduled trips that do not require buses to run all the time. So that's a new one. So we're looking for feedback on that. And Mr. Chair, with your permission, I'll go through the 5 and then we can come back with questions. Okay. Priority 2, housing, we did not make any changes to the intent of each initiative. Number 3, redeveloping waterfront and downtown. There's a lot of work here. I would draw your attention to 3.2. In the original draft, it stated, a quote, animate the dormant lock station under Beckwith Street. So in discussions with Parks Canada recently, it's become reasonably obvious that we need to work collaboratively to come up with an area master plan for Smiths Falls, right from the detached to Old Slice, so that we can start filling in those pieces in a more coordinated, deliberate, and well, a coordinated way. So, so we broadened that out a little bit to look at the whole corridor within Smiths Falls and come up with an area master plan. I would predict one of the items or projects within that would be animating the lock, but we felt there was an opportunity to take a more holistic view of this particular initiative. It does broaden it, it's quite large now, but we just felt in consultations with Parks Canada, it was important to come up with an overall strategy before we start doing individual projects. So that would be the big change in number 3. If we move on to number 4, priority 4, that's infrastructure renewal. This is new, 4.3 is new. And I think, my recollection from all of our discussions was that climate protection was important, but in an odd sort of way, it didn't appear in the plan, in the original draft. And that's something that was pointed out through the stakeholder engagement process. So we've added 4.3, which basically says we're going to achieve our priorities or our objectives rather under the Partners for Climate Protection program. And as committee may recall, it's a 5-step project. We've passed or we've achieved step 1. We're on to step 2. Certainly the Climate Action Committee will help inform that process. So we felt it was important to have at least one initiative related to climate protection. So again, that's here for your consideration. Priority 5, new business attraction. We did not make any changes. We did some wordsmithing on it, but I think the intent largely resembles what we came up with in January. And then priority 6, the only change we made here is we heard consistently from people through the engagement process that parks and trails are important. They need to be in here, but they also pointed out that recreation is equally important. So we need to define what that means. Does that mean programming, or does that mean providing, the infrastructure and the facilities for recreation? So we need to get our heads around that. But I think it was a really good observation that recreation is an important part of quality of life features in any town. So we've simply added that word in the title, and of course that'll be picked up when we operationalize the Parks and Recreation Master Plan in item 6.3. So we felt it was a more fulsome description of what we're trying to achieve, or what we believe we're trying to achieve in priority number 6. So those are the changes and additions. I'd be happy to answer any specific questions about the measurements, who's leading it, and the timelines. We need to make sure we're all comfortable with the timelines that we've identified. So I'll pause there, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Questions, Councilor McGuire?
Thanks, Mr. Chair, and thank you, CM Morris, for getting it together and getting it organized. And I really like a lot of the tweaks that have come from the consultation and from your work over the last few months. So it's good. My thing, when I look though at the last strategic plan to this strategic plan, is in the last strategic plan we had 41 initiatives, and this one has 27. And so we're about a third less. And also we've got in the last term strategic plan, about 70% of our initiatives were actions where it was a complete or it had a deliverable associated with it that was the final product, where 30% were studies and plans. And now in our strategic plan as presented tonight, we've got 40% are action items and 60% are studies and plans. And I'm just I'm uncomfortable with that ratio, I guess, and with the decrease. So personally, I'd like to see more actions added to this, because I think some of these things we're ready to do the investment. We're ready to move forward. We did a lot of planning in the last term, and I'd like to see the associated actions with that move forward faster. For example, the 1.1 with the active transportation plan, we're not going to have an implementation plan until Q2. But with our active transportation plan, we have high priority projects like the Old Slice Crossing. And I think independent of the Parks Master Plan and independent of all these other things, we have a very unsafe link for people to get from Queen Street to the park. And we need to do something, whether or not Parks is going to get on board or not. To wait until Q2 2024 means that it's not going to make it into the budget until 2025. And then 2026 is an election year and we're into this all over again. So that's one where I'd like to see that moved up, and I'd like to see more action items associated with it. When we talk about the trails and the connectivity and the active transportation, I see 1.1, 1.4, 3.1, 6.1 are very interconnected. So just I'd like to see more substance on it. And I think with when we come to 3.1 with placemaking, I'd like to see it really stand alone, because I think it needs its own amount of attention. We really struggled with the placemaking last term with Parks Canada. But it shows how much work needs to go into those projects. They're not small projects to get them past the finish line. When we get to 6.4, develop a parkland dedication bylaw that leverages green space improvements, when our Parks and Recreation Master Plan is showing that we've got more parkland per capita than is recommended in the plan or was recommended as the standard. I'm not sure, for me personally, that wouldn't have been it's not a priority right now. We're getting those parks we do have up to speed with more action items is what I'm looking for. And then when we look at my last one is 4.4, prioritizing projects to decrease liability exposure. I would hope that would be a part of 4.1 where I hope that's a part of operations, where it's strategic plan, I just visioning and that high level stuff. It's, if we're not doing that already, is it not an operational thing that we need to make a part of things? So I guess overall, I'd like to see some more action initiatives added into this to help balance out that ratio of action items and studies and plans for this term of council.
Thank you. Councillor Miller.
Thank you, and thanks CAO Morris and staff for all the work on this. Once again, I agree with a lot of what Councillor McGuire is saying tonight. I appreciate, having been on the staff side of things, that there are fewer initiatives and priorities, because I think that the last strategic plan maybe set us up for some disappointment because we weren't able to accomplish everything in the 4-year period. So if this feels like a more manageable number, then I'm in support of that. But I did just do a rough count while Councillor McGuire was speaking, and there are, I think, 7 studies and plans within those 27-ish numbers. So perhaps we could take another crack at it to make more specific actionable items versus plans. And then I did have one question. Has Parks Canada started their promised master plan for Smiths Falls, or is this us trying to take the initiative and encourage that to happen?
Yeah, so good question. So they have started the process, and they produced a policy document with a focus on the blockhouse in Merrickville, but it set a few, I would say, policy objectives for the overall Rideau Canal, which would have application here in Smiths Falls. So that was my understanding, the first step in the process. The next step is to look at specific area plans for various lock stations, Smith Falls being one of the early priorities. So so the timeline that we're being told is in place is kind of 2025 to have that completed. So we think there may be merit in us getting a head start on that process by providing content that could potentially be weaved in to a Parks Canada plan. And you know, candidly, perhaps an opportunity to accelerate the process if we can get a head start on it. So there are a lot of, well, 7 out of 27 isn't an overwhelming amount of studies, but I would remind committee that these things are cyclical. Like 2 plans ago, we had a lot of studies. The last plan, we did a lot of implementation, and we implemented most of those things. The Old Slides example is a good one, Councillor McGuire. That's moving on. That's moving ahead in any event, right? Because it's still left over from the last plan. And I would remind you, there are still straggling items from the last plan that we're still implementing. So I think it represents an evolution of strategic planning, where you do a lot of studies and planning, then you implement them, and then you start the cycle over again. So I guess my general comment would be, I don't know that there's too many of these studies we could short circuit, right? You can't jump to implementation without a study. But if what I'm hearing is correct, we can add more action items. But I don't know that there's too many opportunities to short circuit the study. Maybe accelerate it, right? But that's a resourcing issue that we'll have to look at. But I'd say generally speaking, this is evolutionary in terms of our last 3 strategic plans that we've done.
Thank you. I saw your hand, Councillor McGuire. Councillor McKenna and the mayor have their virtual hands up, and I don't know who put theirs up first. So whoever wants to go ahead. Councillor McKenna.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair and my colleagues. It's my opinion that plans are action and studies are action. Good process is critical. I don't want to waste money jumping around, just trying to look like we're, and I know you're not suggesting that, but I agree with Cyril Morris that that is action to me. So I'm totally comfortable with planning and being thoughtful and deliberate about where we're going. I had a question regarding under 4.4, under priority 4, I just didn't understand. It says prioritizing projects to decrease liability exposure. I just want to understand a little better what that means.
Yeah, great question. So through the chair, so this came up in our January 11th session with council. So what that means is giving higher priority to a street that may have uneven sidewalks that could represent a liability exposure, as opposed to repairing those sidewalks until the sewer wears out and then doing the whole road. So it's looking at those visible things on the surface that could represent a liability, and really reconsidering it as a capital project as opposed to a maintenance item. If we get too many maintenance items, that's a clear signal that we need to be renewing the infrastructure, not repairing the infrastructure.
That's helpful. Thank you. And if I may, Mr. Chair, the other one was around the asset management plan update, which I'm delighted for. And this came up at County Council when they delivered their asset management plan. It's my understanding, and it came up earlier in our conversation about natural infrastructure, which I really like that term, or green assets, whatever. It's not this iteration that it's mandatory. The next asset management plan, it's not mandatory that we actually look at our green infrastructure, but the one following that, I believe, or at some point after that, is there any thought that we could, maybe through the Climate Action Committee, just start to identify some of those natural assets or infrastructure so that we're ready. I don't want to wait for the province to tell us when we have to do that. And I know you have a lot on your plate, but if we could somehow get a head start on that, it's one of my thoughts. But overall, I'm very supportive and appreciate that.
Thank you. Yeah, go ahead, Senior Morris.
Yeah, thank you. So yeah, I mean, natural infrastructure is certainly emerging. And so, yes, I think there's an opportunity to identify it. Firstly, define it. But then, once we identify an asset, we need to plan for its replacement. And that gets very difficult if you're talking about a marsh or some other natural infrastructure that we may or may not have full control over. So they serve a purpose, perhaps a climate change purpose or a quality of life purpose. But when you attempt to put that on a balance sheet, it gets a little more difficult. So my suggestion is, yes, we need to identify them, and we need to eventually work out how we quantify it, value it, and invest in it. So these are answers we don't need today, but they're answers we'll eventually need.
Seeing more of the parks and the trail known trees, and there's a lot of other infrastructure. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, for sure. So good
Thank you
point
for that. Mayor Panko.
Yep, thank you. A couple of thoughts. First, with number one, transportation networks, and the goal to enable improved mobility by examining existing transportation networks both within the town and beyond in a way that supports employment and accessibility. So under 1.4, identify gaps for improved and increased pedestrian activity, I suggest we add, including those with limited mobility or requiring mobility devices or assistance, to ensure we have that focus. And then under 1.5, options for improved mobility, and that, of course, a transit needs study. Many of you are probably familiar that the county did do a transit needs study, I think back in 2018, 2019, somewhere in there. And so I think we also need to add here, both within our community and in conjunction with Lanark County, for improved mobility to neighboring municipalities, a possibility to reconsider the possibility of regional transit networks. And then my other comments relate to number 2, housing, and the goal of support more diverse built housing stock to ensure all citizens have a home they can afford. And as I mentioned earlier, I mean, there's studies which indicate that 1 in 4 of our citizens are housing insecure today, are paying over 30% of their income in housing. We know that about half of the renters almost 44% of our citizens are renters. So it's a huge impact on our community and great risk. So I would suggest, well, to ensure affordability, I think we need a greater emphasis on affordability within the initiatives. And so I like 2.1, leveraging our CIP to create 40 new dwelling units. I suggest we add the word affordable in front of dwelling. And if we take, and I'm not sure how we get the measurement, because we don't know how many of our new homes should be considered affordable, how many should be deeply affordable as rent geared to income, how many should be affordable, meaning below market rent. And we know that if we had the ability to do inclusionary zoning bylaw, that speaks to 15% of homes within development should be affordable. So if we use that measurement, and we also use a measurement I mentioned earlier of 1,000 new homes to be built in Smith Falls over the next decade to meet our share of the 1.5 million provincially. So that's 100 homes a year, 15% of those to be affordable. We should be aiming for 15 affordable homes each year, or 60 during this term of council. So I'd like to get that captured within the initiative and within the measurements. And that's it for my comment.
I'll just ask everybody, so I don't have to go back. I'm fine with those suggestions, and What about everybody else?
Yeah.
Okay, good. Okay, I had Chris and then, well, actually, Chris, you've spoken. Don, do you have a comment?
Yes, I do. On the redevelopment waterfront and downtown, I think we have to be very strong here. I think we have to get our work in order, and I think we have to push Parks Canada, because I don't think we can be dragging our feet on this. And maybe if we push hard enough, maybe they'll understand that, these are things that have to happen. The town's very committed, and let's get to it and get it done, because we do have beautiful waterfront that does need to be redeveloped. One of the other ones, creating a local farmers market. I believe that could be happening with the new art hub, because being there at their opening, and they're certainly hoping for a farmers market there. And I had a very good feeling about what I saw there and heard there when I was at their opening last week. It was great. The other one that I wanted to comment on too is Parks, Trails and Recreation. And I have a meeting Thursday night with Cataraqui Trail. And so this is something like I want to bring forward, that we need to get our trails connected. We need to have a trailhead, and we need all these trails working with all of us together in order to put this into place. Very, very important. And I think we need to push hard to get the trailhead in and get these trails connected. The Railway Museum of Eastern Ontario has been wanting boardwalk in through kind of the swale area along the museum. Could be done without destroying any land there. That could be part of the connection. So I think we need to be looking at all the opportunities that we have to get these type of things in play. And I've heard good comments tonight, and I think we can move forward in a very positive way.
Thanks. And I'll go ahead, Councillor Steele-Morse.
Thank you. So if we could just explore 3.4 a little bit. Again, this was written in January, and since then the farmers market has happened. So is there a comfort level in removing this?
I have a comment. That's not my
Oh,
thumb.
sorry. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I don't know that I would remove it. I think maybe there's an opportunity for partnership and support. So until we have a farmers market up and running and successful and the most popular place in town, I'd like to leave it on the plan.
Okay. I'm just looking at it. You have it 2024, so we've got one this year, so I agree. We could collaborate. Hopefully it's a success this year. And I'll just say that we spent a full day in January, and I think that what I see here is reflected in what we talked about, and so I'm comfortable with it. The transit needs study. I mean, it's a study. It's not. We're not doing a transit system right now, and I think there's supports there that already exist. So we'll, but we can have a look at that. And the Parks Canada piece that's mentioned here, collaborate with them to develop an area master plan. And I'm really sort of disappointed to hear C.O. Morris tell me that their first steps are centered around Merrickville Blockhouse, and they've evacuated a Victoria Park, and it's sitting there basically derelict. And what a piece of land and potential that we have. So I would put an emphasis on that in this plan, and I agree with Councillor Quinn. Other than that, I think everything that I see here, we talked about and we agreed upon after a long day of talking and all the rest of it. So I think you've reflected everything. 27 initiatives I'm fine with that, and I agree that study. I think Councillor McKenna mentioned it. Study is action, and it's getting things done. And to Councillor McGuire's point about Old Slice, it's going to get done, and we talked about that. That's from last time, and so I expect that to be in this year's budget. And we talked about it last year's budget, so that's going to get done. So those are my comments. Good work, and I like the fact that we have a reporting. I don't know how quarterly or whatever how we're doing on the plan, and then we can talk about it at that time as well. So if you had anything else, Councillor McGuire, other than that, I think I got support here.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Yeah, so I guess my first comment is if there's things from the last strategic plan that are being carried over, I think it's important to put them down, because as much as we didn't accomplish all 41 initiatives in the last plan, we've made real progress towards each of them. And I think part of that was having them front and center in the plan. So every quarter or whenever those updates came, it was there and it was top of mind. So I'd like to see all of those initiatives added to this year for the sake of the continuity. I really support Mayor Pecco's comments on adding accessibility to the active transportation stuff. If there's anything else that we can, add that to, that's one thing that's missing from this draft. Another thing from the last strategic plan to this one that I hope is carried over is the tree canopy and the trees, because we don't have anything for that right now. And lastly, I feel very strongly if there's any way, CEO Morris, from a staff perspective, that we can get that 1.1 active transportation implementation moved from Q2 2024 to Q3 2023, Q4 2023, in order to get it in the 2024 budget. I think that's really important, because I think a lot of what we're talking about and a lot of the comments tonight are centered around that implementation plan. And the sooner we can get it out, the better. And I've got nothing against plans. Where I get frustrated is when we pay for these plans and then we need to do another implementation plan, and it's just plan after plan after plan. That's what I'm getting at here. Let's get these implementation plans out and let's get things implemented.
Okay, thank you. Mayor Pecco, you got something else?
Yeah, I just wanted to let staff, I guess the public know, we had a very encouraging meeting with the executive team from Parks Canada a couple of weeks ago. And so I would suggest the very positive tone of a strong willingness to work together, and staff are in the process of sort of finalizing the multitude of issues that we share common interest with. So I say I'm more encouraged with the relationship and opportunities there now than I have been in recent times. And I think with the management plan being tabled in Parliament, I think it's given them the opportunity to start being more tactical and take a more of a wholesome approach for Smith Falls.
Thank you for that. I'm really glad to hear that, and I just sent it there earlier. So that's it's in the strat plan, so it's they know that it's a priority for us. That's what's important. Right. Okay, any other comments? Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, I just want to circle back to Councillor McGuire's comment regarding rigor in tree canopy and preservation. And this ties into both a couple of major goals. One, our climate protection needs, and it'll be discussion probably within our climate action working group, as well as quality of life. And trying to ensure that we maintain the tree canopy we have throughout town. So one thing, and I'm not suggesting we have to make a decision on it, but somewhere I'd like to have a consideration towards a greater preservation of our tree canopy. We have a municipal policy for our land. We don't have a policy which extends beyond our property. So I think it's important that we consider the possibility of a tree canopy policy that would govern all properties within town. And these are not a unusual thing. So I think it's something that should fit within, well, it can fit in with number 6, or it can fit in within number 4 as well, when it comes to climate protection and climate environmental sustainability.
Yeah. Thank you. CO Morse, go ahead. I thought we had a tree canopy policy.
We do, Mr. Chair, but it's only for public town-owned property.
Oh.
So we encourage private property to be the growth of the canopy. So the mayor brings up a really good point, and one of the things on Mr. Grenke's long to-do list is a land alteration bylaw, which would regulate removal of trees. We see that, from time to time. And it can eclipse any tree planting program we have if someone comes in and clear cuts the property. So we need to be mindful of that. So that's a really good point, and we will embed it within this plan in some fashion.
Just a sec, Councillor Quinn.
Just on that.
Go ahead.
On the trees, we have to be mindful too that organizations like REAL are planting trees this year. So, we have to take that into consideration as well as they're helping with this. So they do have a big planting happening this year.
Yeah. Okay, so I think that you've gotten some comments, CO Morse. Can you incorporate what you've heard tonight, and then we'll try this again? I mean, I don't think we should be doing this meeting after meeting because, as I said, I think we spent a lot of time in January. You spent a lot of time consulting, and what I see here is basically what we talked about. So it's, I think it's a great job. So how do you suggest we go forward?
Yeah, absolutely. This has been a great discussion and filled in a few blanks. And so we'll capture as much of this as we can and bring it back at the next meeting.
Okay.
Yeah, this has been helpful. So thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Everybody okay with that? We've come to the end.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
Just for clarity, is that to bring it back to council next week for approval based on the changes, or back to committee of the whole for further discussion?
Yeah. Good question.
I would suggest back to committee of the whole. Just to make sure we're, this is an important document. And we just want to make sure everyone's comfortable with it. So the extra week or two, I think many of these are underway already, so it won't put us back in terms of timelines.
Thank you.
That would be June 12th.
Correct.
Okay. Okay, now I'm at the end. The recommended motion that the committee adjourn its proceedings at 8:06 p.m. and stand so adjourned until the next duly called committee meeting. Mover, Councillor Quinn, seconded by Councillor McGuire. All in favor? Adios.